their culture with us through their work. And it is something we've asked if have a theme that we could focus on, because the Native experience, Native culture, Native people are very complex and diverse. So can we look at the idea of family, home, and connections, that something that binds us all to our tribal identity. And each author, the storytellers, have a way of articulating that in their work. So we're going to ask them to do that. But again, as I read their resumes, as I read their biographies, these are very, very impressive people who've done a lot of work in a lot of arenas. And so we're fortunate that they were able to find some time to join us and share their work with us. One thing we want to do is to do a land acknowledgement. And I belong to the Lower Elwha and Uxklayam people, the Clallam people, who are not far from Seattle, at the north end of Olympic Peninsula, the Olympic Mountains. And our people have a connection with this land, like every Native people have connection with their land. And it comes out in our language, our songs, our stories. And so we want to acknowledge the land itself, that we are one of many nations that exist here. The humans are just one nation that exists here. The earth that supports us, we want to honor that earth, the mother, the one that gives us life, the one that gives us food and water and air and all the things that we need to live in the world, provided with love and abundance by the earth itself. And we are the beneficiaries of that. And we can never, ever thank her enough. But as you know, our stories come from the earth itself. And so each of these authors are writing from their own tribal experience, connected, I'm sure, to their experience with their land. So we have some things to just get going, and we'll go ahead and get started with our speakers. I just wanted to also just say that I teach classes at the university on storytelling and art, and I really thank the university for those opportunities, because we reach out to not just Native students, but to non-Native students. And the idea that we share our culture, again, as we've been taught to share, in a good way. So we are glad all of you are here to share with us, learning from these authors, learning from the storytellers, some things that there's probably no other way to explain. Through their work, we're going to explain, understand more. So we have three presenters tonight. We have the author Tracy Sorrell, who's from the Cherokee Nation. We have another author, Michelle Jacob, from the Yakama people, the Yakama Nation. And we're going to have a storyteller, Fern Naomi Renville, from the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate. And she'll be sharing stories as a way of bringing this to a close. So I'm just anxious to get going and hear these people and their work and learn from them. So why don't we go ahead, and we're going to start with, oh, I just want to let you know that if you have any questions or comments you'd like to share with the speakers, the presenters, the program, please do that in the chat, and we'll have someone monitoring those. So at the end of the presentations, we'll have an opportunity to respond to some of those chat, either questions or comments. And but we'll save that to the end. So we do have a way of bringing this to a close. So we're going to then start with, I had to write these down in notes because this is like 4 pages of stuff for each of these people. And again, very, very powerful Native people, Native women, Native academics, people who are working in various arenas. You'll find out as they tell you a little bit more about themselves. So hold on one sec. This is what happens when you ask a storyteller to write all this stuff down. We're supposed to commit these things to memory. Our first presenter is Traci Sorell, a fiction and nonfiction writer. And she also writes a lot for children and teens. That's an audience that I think are hungry for cultural knowledge in the form that she brings it to them. She allows them to, through the characters, through the plot, through all the stories that she tells in her work, allow young people to access their culture through her work. So I think that's a wonderful, wonderful way to do that. And again, we're going to be talking a lot about Well, she'll be talking a lot more about her work. I know that I looked at her books and she has a range of things talking about Native American women, aerospace engineers, termination and relocation, policies from the past in the government that impacted our people dramatically, and the experience is still resonating for us. She writes about those kind of things. She also was a former Indian law attorney, which is a study unto itself. And so I know that she brings a lot of that knowledge, not just her cultural knowledge, but that kind of knowledge of the law and the treaties, our native sovereignty, issues like that into her work. So I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Sorrell. And Tracy, thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Wado, Roger, and Kai for that wonderful introduction, and Wado to the University of Washington American Indian Studies Department for hosting this event and inviting me. I'm honored. I'm a first-generation college graduate, and my undergraduate and graduate degrees were in American Indian Studies. So it is an honor to kick off this event, and the fact that your department is celebrating 50 years is fantastic. I'm absolutely in love with the idea of American Indian Studies programs, because I feel like, especially as a first-generation college graduate student, you know, that was where I had community both on campus, and it connected me to the community outside of campus, because I did not go to campus. I did not go to undergrad near my my home and my family. And so anyway, that said, it's an honor to be here this evening. I'm going to share with you some of my works, and I'm coming to you live from the Cherokee Nation Reservation in what is now northeastern Oklahoma. And let me see here, get that started. As Roger mentioned, I write fiction and nonfiction for young people. That's not what I've always done. I have worked as a federal Indian law attorney. I've worked in advocacy, working in national nonprofits on behalf of American Indian and Alaska Native elders. And though after I became a mother and I was reading stories to my son, I realized that there were no books featuring contemporary Cherokee families, our culture, our language for young people. That everything was our traditional stories that had been put into books, or everything was pre-1900. And so I thought, you know, this child is going to school soon. What are they going to have at school? Like, if these are the books, it's like he doesn't exist. And so that really propelled me. So I'm going to share a little bit with you tonight from my first book, We Are Grateful, Ojali Haliga, which is actually that sentence in Cherokee. The long word you see on the left side there in the second line of that title. Cherokee does not use an alphabet. We have a syllabary. So Sequoia created symbols, which you see on the right side of that title in the second row, for each syllable. And we have 88 characters that make up our syllabary. So Ojali Haliga is We Are Grateful. And I do this as a read aloud. I travel around to different tribal schools, public schools. I work with teachers, etc. At the mountain's base, as Roger mentioned, is a poem story that I wrote talking about a Cherokee family that's waiting for their family member to come home. And she is a pilot in battle. And I wrote that because we often talk about Natives serving at higher numbers in the armed forces than the rest of the population for our percentage of the overall US population, but we don't talk a lot about Native women serving. And so I really wanted to shine a spotlight on their service. I will read a little bit from Indian No More. That's a historical middle grade novel that looks at termination and relocation. And the two books on the lower right are ones that are coming out next spring, nonfiction books. The first one is about Mary Golder Ross, who was a Cherokee woman, grew up not far from where I live, and she was the very first female Native American engineer in the country, the first female engineer, period, for Lockheed Corporation. She fixed plane defects. She built designed rockets. She worked on interplanetary space travel to Mars and Venus. and most of her work is still classified, thus the title of the book. But she was instrumental in bringing so many more women into the engineering field and really focused on recruiting other Native Americans. So I'm excited for that to come out in March. And then We Are Still Here, Native American Truths Everyone Should Know. As Roger mentioned, you know, in my past life, I've worked on federal Indian law and policy, and I know how it was when I was growing up, and it's still the reality now. Because Native nations disappear out of curriculum after 1900, there is not a concept of our ongoing sovereignty, our ongoing culture, language, the struggles that we have, the victories that we have. None of that is shared and integrated into the curriculum. And so that book is an overview that's very accessible with very lyrical language that talks about what happens basically from the end of treaty making in 1871 to the present. So I'm super excited for that to be out in April. And with that, we're going to dive right in. I would invite you, this first book that I'm going to read, we're going to do some interactive things. So I would invite you to grab a sheet of paper and something to write with. I know if we've got students out there, some of them are working on whiteboards these days at home virtually, but literally, you know, a sheet of paper just like this, where you put a line across and a line down. Post-it note will work. If you would like to share what you've written down or you've thought about in the chat with each other so you can see those things, that would be wonderful. So now that you've got something to write with, or you're going to type it on screen, that's fine. So we are grateful, Ojali Haliga. The thing I will say about Cherokee belief system, and again, you know, many other tribes have the same belief system, but I don't want people to think that, you know, we're all the same everywhere, because we're not. But we put a large emphasis on living in balance. And so even our teachings around gratitude, as it says on this page, Cherokee people say Ojali Haliga, which is we are grateful, to express gratitude. It's a reminder to celebrate our blessings and reflect on struggles daily throughout the year and across the seasons. So in that mind of balance, we're taught to be happy, you know, when things are wonderful, but also to be grateful when things are a struggle, because that teaches us interdependence. That teaches us how to ask for help. When we're in a stronger position and someone else needs our help, we can offer that, etc. So we'll start in fall, and we're going to go through the 4 seasons, because unlike, you know, the United States, which puts this emphasis on National Gratitude Month in November, and Thanksgiving, of course, is when we express gratitude, we're taught to express it daily. And we start with kind of a fresh start in fall with Cherokee New Year, and we just celebrated that in October. So Uligo Husdi, fall. When cool breezes blow and leaves fall, we say Ojali Hiliga. As shell shakers dance all night around the fire and burnt cedar scent drifts upward during the great new moon ceremony. As we clean our house, wear new clothes, enjoy a feast, and forget old quarrels to celebrate the Cherokee New Year. While we collect buckbrush and honeysuckle to weave baskets, to remember our ancestors who suffered hardship and loss on the Trail of Tears, and have hope as Alisi, Grandma, cradles the newest member of the family and reveals his Cherokee name. So now I want to invite you to take your paper or type there in the chat some things that you are grateful for in fall. And we'll just do this for about 30 seconds. Just things that when you think of fall, because that's the season we're in right now, that you're grateful for. Okay, I hope you have a few things. So I will show you my list. I have falling leaves. I love to have Cherokee New Year. It's a fresh start. I also love apple cider, and I love having the last harvest of tomatoes and peppers, because all summer long I've been making fresh salsa. And so I know that that's going to have to last me until the next year. I'll be having my bottled salsa after that. So I hope, if, like I say, if you want to, go ahead and put those things in the chat. If you don't have to. Gola, winter. So this is our upcoming season. As bears sleep deep and snow blankets the ground, we say Ojali Haliga. As elders share stories and we savor buttery bean bread and steamy hominy soup. As older children teach the younger ones how to make corn husk dolls and play cane flutes. While we gather to remember an uncle who has passed away. As men cuddle babies and sing traditional lullabies in Jalagi, Cherokee. All right, so now it's time to think about winter. So write down what you are grateful for in winter. And I forgot to show this for fall, but when we gather that honeysuckle, this is the kind of baskets that we make. This is a very small one. We make much larger ones, but you can see it's a double-walled basket. And so they'll take and process all those honeysuckle vines to come up with that, and then gather other plants to get the color on that one. And as you saw in the picture for winter, they were making they had some pottery going on. So this is one of our, a small Cherokee piece of pottery, and you see the diamond design, and that's very typical in our artwork and stuff. So let's write down what we're grateful for in winter. I am such a messy writer, but so I've got there, I love quiet time and writing, the snow, cardinals, and feeding animal friends. We've got lots of deer and wild turkey that run along the back of our property, and reading. You know, it's just a quiet time. It's fun family time. My family is very competitive with board games, so we tend to spend time doing that as well. And catching up on movies and just spending time together and making our favorite dishes when we're all together. So those are just a few things that we do. Again, I'll look forward to seeing your stuff in the chat in a moment. And then the book goes on to do spring and summer, but this is the final spread. And it says, every day, every season, Ojali Haliga, we are grateful. And if you go back and look at the beginning of the book, we've started with a family, and there's this 4 seasons tree. And then the wonderful illustrator, Fern Naomi, has given us that same tree at the end with parts of each season. And I just absolutely love the artwork in this book. On every double page spread, if you go back and look at them, you will find that bird. And I don't know if anybody knows what that bird is, but it's a pileated woodpecker. And they are found in the eastern woodlands, so the kind of eastern half of the United States. And we have those here in the Cherokee Nation. And when I go camping by the lake, I see them a lot. They are a tall bird. They're 8 to 12 inches tall. So when you see them, you cannot miss them. And they're usually on the bottom part of the tree. So Fernay put a pileated woodpecker on each double page spread for readers to find. And so kids love to do that, but I'll ask them who that is. And they say woody woodpecker or a red-headed woodpecker. And I'm like, no, it's a pileated woodpecker. It's also associated with our Cherokee stickball game, which is a ne-jodi, little brother of war, because it used to be our traditional way of settling disputes with other tribes. And now it's played for a social game. It's played at ceremonial grounds. There are tournament teams that play it, but it's not, played to settle disputes anymore, although that might be interesting to do. The next bit I want to share with you, because I don't want to run out of time. 109 tribes found themselves in the crossfire of federal legislation in the 1950s that, in essence, said they no longer existed in the United States' eyes. So Congress had passed what were called federal termination laws, and President Eisenhower signed the one that impacted Grand Ronde and many other tribes. What that did was said that no longer could the tribal government exercise sovereignty over its citizens or its land. And so if individual citizens were going to stay where they were living, they had to purchase the land outright at very marked up prices, which a majority of people could not afford. At the same time, the federal government has a federal relocation program that they're doing that is across Native nations. So not just at those 109 that were terminated. A voluntary program. Of course, how voluntary can it be when you're homeless? But for other folks in other tribes, the emphasis is on moving them to cities to get education and jobs, etc. So what ends up happening is, of course, these folks who are from terminated tribes are moved to cities. And, like our former chief here in the Cherokee Nation, Wilma Mankiller, her family moved from Stillwell, Oklahoma, just east of me, out to the Bay Area. My friend Charlene Willing McManus, her family, she's Umpqua, and she was an enrolled citizen of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. She was moved from, basically where they're at in Northwest Oregon to Los Angeles. And many other people were moved to the Seattle area from her tribe, as well as Portland and San Francisco. So this book takes place in the 1950s. It's historical fiction because it's based on Charlene's experience, the experience of other people at Grand Ronde, and her imagination. But Charlene had cancer. She had gone into remission, and the cancer came back while she was working on the final revisions for the book. So she had the letter from the editor and asked me to finish the revisions so that it could be published. And again, because of my background in Indian studies and then later in law, like knowing the impact that we still live with today from having this period of termination and relocation, now over 70% of our people live outside of their tribal areas. I knew that this was a book that needed to be out in the world. And so whatever I could do to assist her, I was going to, because there is nothing in the curriculum about this, but it's also a very accessible way for not just young people, but for adults to understand what it was like for families and for these tribal communities during this time. So I want to start off, we're following Regina Pettit. She's 10 years old. And so I'll read you just a little bit at the beginning, but it's, I fell in love with Regina, the character's voice, and the story. So chapter 1, The Walking Dead. Before being terminated, I was Indian. Now, I certainly don't mean I was killed off or anything. It was 1954. The United States government didn't do that anymore. They just filed away our tribal roll numbers, erased our reservation from the map. What were our tribal roll numbers? They were numbers the tribe assigned to its citizens and used by the federal government to see who belonged to the tribe. So my number verified I was Regina Pettit, roll number 3669, daughter of John Pettit, roll number 858, granddaughter of Maud Pettit, roll number 25, and Sid Pettit, roll number 18. And that was what made you Indian to the US government, numbers. Even after all that counting, the government chose to terminate us. I really don't know all the reasons why, but my chich, my grandmother, said this much. Termination means we're the walking dead. Now I ask you, how can we be dead if we're still walking? Chapter 2, Res Life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. I was born on the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation, just over 30 miles west from the state capital in Salem, Oregon. I had lived there all my life. I didn't know any other way to live other than as an Umpqua Indian. My family was Umpqua. I was Umpqua. That's just how it was. Living on the res, I played outside with my younger sister, Pee-wee. Her given name was Teresa, but nobody except our school teacher ever called her that. We ate wild blackberries and plucked blue larkspurs without any adults watching. Ours was the small reservation compared to others in Oregon. My people didn't bother the whites that lived around us. Our res owned a cramped trailer that housed our health and dental clinic, a post office that used to be someone's house, and an everything you need from canned beans to carpenter nails store on the corner of Highway 22 and Grand Rod Road. My elementary school was painted yellow, and we had an old cemetery down the road. Our ancestors were buried there, like Choop Tem, my grandfather, as well as Daddy's 5-year-old sister, Bertha, who died from the flu epidemic of 1934. Down from the cemetery was the Pettit family home. Our house, with chipped white paint and warped boards, was surrounded by acres of tall grasses, plots of fragrant mock orange, and a forest filled with chirping squirrels and robins. We had 3 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, a mudroom, and a newly built bathroom with an indoor toilet. Getting a toilet inside was one of the happiest days of my life. When I was little, I dreaded stepping off the back porch to go to the outhouse before bed. It was too close to the woods. Daddy would have to coax me to go out. But Daddy, I'm scared. What about Siyaku? I'd peer out into the woods as Daddy grinned. Oh, the Sasquatch won't bother you. First, he's shy. Second, he's over 6 feet tall and smells like a wet dog. And third, well, if he bothers you, you must have been misbehaving. I wasn't too sure about that shy part. Regardless, my trips to the outhouse at night were few and far between, and extremely brief. Daddy's cousin, Harlan's house was just half a mile from us. Cousin Harlan and Daddy were really close, like brothers close. They talked story all the time, especially about World War II. It was right after Pearl Harbor, Daddy began, when I conned Harlan into joining the Navy with me. We both needed to get off the res before we got into any more trouble with the law. He meant the way they were going, jail would be their next residence. According to Cousin Harlan, it was a rainy summer morning when that big bus came barreling down the road. So I'll stop there because I don't want to take up more time, but the story continues with the tribe, and the family experiencing termination and relocation to LA, and Regina going through that whole culture shock of arriving somewhere where everyone interacts with you as if you need to measure up to the Hollywood Indian. And she has no clue what they're talking about because that is so opposite of the culture and the environment she's been raised in. So I hope you'll check that out. But that picture in the top right on your screen is at the base of Spirit Mountain where Regina lives, where Charlene grew up. And the bottom is the house that she goes to in Los Angeles on 58th Place, where the houses are right next to each other and they're these little squares. And I went and visited her old neighborhood. And I can't fathom, having been in both places, what a culture shock that must have been as a child. So I will say Wado, thank you, and I look forward to your questions later.
And Wado, Tracy, as I was listening to you reading and also sharing some of your insights that you were bringing to your work, I think it's really important that we talk about, especially our young people, hear about exactly what that last book was dealing with, which is termination. The Relocation Act they're probably linked together in various ways, but our young people need to understand there's a history of our people standing up against government policies that adversely impact our people. And you bring, it looks like, in a very, a way a young person can relate to. So I really appreciate exactly what I heard today. And I also appreciate that you shared with us the idea of the Thanksgivings, being thankful. I know that every tribe that you talk with has, people from various tribes have a history, a cultural history of giving thanks. And you give thanks to the roots that are being gathered, you give thanks to the salmon returning, you give thanks to the berries that are being picked, you give thanks to the elk that come down from the mountains. And so our people do this as just a part of understanding that we're only part of creation, a part of this world, and that we are grateful for everything we receive. I remember talking with a Wampanoag man, and saying that when the Pilgrims proposed having a Thanksgiving, we informed them we already had 7 Thanksgivings during the year. So it was not a novel idea to us that we give thanks constantly. So that kind of history reminds us that our people are in touch with the environment and our stories emanate from the environment. And so it's just wonderful to, again, hear the story of a young woman sharing her story that allows us to see some things we might not see otherwise. So again, thank you for that very insightful process of including the voices of our people, not just, as I said, one of my teachers said there are 2 kinds of stories. One's a long time ago story, which is the legend, the mythic story that our people tell. We keep those alive. But he said there's also the remember when stories, the stories that come from our lives we share. And we weave those 2 stories together, he said. Weave the big story of our culture with the seemingly small stories of our people. They weave together and create one big story. So again, thank you for doing that work. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. All right. And again, if you have questions or comments for Tracy, we'll be collecting them in the chat, and we'll be able to get to some of them at the end of this program. So now I'm going to introduce Michelle Jacobs, another resume that indicates a person who has a variety of interests. And so I'm just going to read a few things that I found in that resume that I thought were, so many things were interesting, but relevant to what we're talking about today. Michelle is an enrolled member of the Yakama Nation and a professor of Indigenous Studies and director of, you're going to have to correct my pronunciation. And so Saspatwatka, probably way off, sorry, a teacher education program in the Department of Education Studies at the University of Oregon. And so she does work, scholarly and activist work that seeks to understand and work towards a holistic sense of health and well-being in our Indigenous communities. And she has written several books, including Yakama Rising, Indigenous Cultural Revitalization, Activism, and Healing. And On Indian Ground, A Return to Indigenous Knowledge Generating Hope, Leadership, and Sovereignty Through Education in the Northwest. Again, those are all powerful words because most of the words she's writing about, revitalization, leadership, hope, those words come from here. And this is where people speak from. So I appreciate that you're using that kind of language to prepare us to understand that we need to speak from here as much as we can in this storyteller's opinion. One of the intriguing titles I saw as a storyteller perked my interest. They all did, but this one, Huckleberries and Coyotes, Lessons from Our More Than Human Relations. So I'm going to track that one down. But besides being a noted author and a recognized author, she's also a writer. I know they seem like the same thing, but I think, especially in the realm of science, social science, education, and health science research journals, where she assists in Native people defining some of the issues that confront us today. And so again, I thank you, Michelle, for being that. I apologize for not being able to get across your full resume, but I'm sure you'll be able to fill in some big gaps and also read to us some of the work that you do. All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Roger. And huge thanks to the organizers and the fellow panelists, storytellers. Thank you for being here. I'll go ahead and introduce myself in the way I was taught by my elders. So, Shif Klawi, Inkna Shwiniksha Michelle Jacob, Washna Shakmaknik, Kukunkash University of Oregon, Subsequent Education Studies, Koshlan Ishwa. So happy to be here with all of you tonight. It's a real honor. I'm gonna go ahead and read you a little bit from the book that Roger had just talked about, Huckleberries and Coyotes, my latest book, and it is graced with the amazing artwork of Yakama artist Crystal Buck. And the story that I'm gonna read to you first is a short one about this precious relative. And I know just through looking quickly at the list of participants, there are many members of the Salmon Nation here. Our people have such a close and loving and grateful relationship with that sacred being. So this story is called Silver Beauty. The silver skin of salmon dancing in my brother's fishing net, more beautiful than silver jewelry I once spied through a window in Santa Fe, more beautiful than the flash of silver at cocktail parties, fingers and wrists glinting as glasses clink in spirited toasts. Our silver beauty dancing in the net, timeless, priceless, sacred. Despite their mild protest, give their blessing, respecting the ancient covenant, allowing our existence. Our past, present, future, always interwoven with the beautiful silver people. And then at the end of the story, here's Crystal's beautiful illustration of Celilo Falls, one of the great gathering places for our people. So in the story, I mentioned the ancient covenant, and that's referring to our people's creation story when Creator Tamawihla was thinking about creating human people. And so Tamawihla approached the first people, because in our teachings, of course, humans are not the first people. The first people are the fish and the animals and the birds, right? All of creation besides humans who came later. But in order for humans to exist, Tamawihla knew that the first people would have to allow that and to sacrifice themselves so that we could exist. And so calling together a grand council, Tamawihla asked the first people, what do you think? Of course, I'm summarizing here. And so salmon and water were the first beings to step forward and say, yes, we will offer ourselves so that the humans can live. And so when we honor water and salmon, we are recalling that tradition of gratitude, of humility. We're recognizing how humble humans are, that we're here because of the generosity of others. And so it is our duty to be in respectful relationship, to be responsible in that relationship with these sacred beings who have always taken care of us. And so we need to take care of them. And I think another important lesson that we can consider in that short story is, what kind of leaders do we want to be and do we want to see? Because remember how that decision was made. Tamawihla, the creator, all-knowing, all-powerful, approached all beings and said, what do you think? Right? Knowing that that decision would deeply impact the first people. And so that humility, that spirit of collaboration, that ability to be a good, thoughtful listener, that's really modeled for us in our stories. And so those are some of those teachings that Roger was reminding us we need to carry in our heart. We need to think about them as we go through our everyday lives. We need to speak and write from that spirit as well. Another story in my book, Huckleberries and Coyotes, is about this being, we knew huckleberry, one of our sacred foods. So I'll go ahead and read that story to you too. The title is, I love Weewnu, huckleberry. I love Weewnu. She's sweet and petite and just a bit tart, kind of like Auntie. I remember Auntie praying over us and offering a blessing before we went Weewnu picking at the lake up at the base of Patu, Mount Adams, in our gorgeous Cascade Mountains. Auntie was already an elder with gray hair neatly permed and set under a headscarf. But she was strong and determined and could thrive on that hill beside the lake. just like we knew. I remember Auntie taking her basket and climbing up that hill, so high she was just a dot. Look at her, she's like a mountain goat, Dad said while puffing on his cigar, taking a short break from fishing. He stood and watched her climb farther up, and then Dad turned and effortlessly threw another cast into the lake, his fishing reel spinning zzz with delight. Bobber almost instantly signaling another rainbow trout. Hoo hoo. I had helped Auntie pick Weevenu in the easy-to-reach bushes lower down by the lake. It was hard to get comfortable crouching in place, picking just the ripe purple berries. No stems or leaves, please. We only want the berries. A tremendous effort of skill, but mostly patience. It seemed like forever before I was able to fill the bottom layer of my basket. This is just a few handfuls of ripe berries, a quantity I could easily eat in about 1.5 seconds. Auntie encouraged me, though, and complimented me on the lack of leaves and stems in my basket. Those will be easy to clean and use later, she reminded me. We all knew the tedious task of cleaning berries from a sloppy picker, the slow work of finding and removing all the stem and leaf debris. How quickly we like to condemn such a picker as immoral, thoughtless, selfish, in a hurry, some of the most vicious insults we could think of. No, no, Auntie would intervene. You must think kind and good thoughts when you're handling our sacred foods. Weevenu is your sister. You're harming her if you say harsh things or hold bad feelings about her or around her. Yes, Auntie, I'm sorry. We'd quickly get back on track, stepping into our better selves. Of course, most of the berries were easy to clean, as they'd come from Auntie's huge berry basket she repeatedly filled. Gallons and gallons of berries. Her many decades of practice picking huckleberries made her a true expert. Yet she always had patience, encouragement, and kind words for beginners who were struggling to fill even the smallest basket or bag. Auntie's lessons stay with us. Her spirit soars like the eagle, gliding near the hills where she used to pick weevenu. Every time I taste weevenu, I remember her. Sweet, petite, and just a bit tart. I love my auntie, and I love weevenu. And then Crystal drew another beautiful picture for the end of the story. So these are fun stories about our more than human relations. Some folks say non-humans, but I like the phrase more than human. And I think it's a nice fit with our cultural teaching to remember the first people and the responsibilities that we have to be a good relative to them. So those are a couple stories from my book, Huckleberries and Coyotes. And for those of you who know me, you know I love Auntie stories. I even sneaked one in there in Huckleberries and Coyotes, didn't I? And guess what? I have a whole book of Auntie stories in my book, The Auntie Way. And so this book is also illustrated by Yakama artist Crystal Buck. It's an amazing artist. I'm so grateful to collaborate with her. So I'll go ahead and read you a couple stories from this one too. I'm trying to pick which one first. Well, I know we have, we'll stick with foods. I'll read you one about yachi, or bitterroot. Here's the illustration at the beginning of that story. For those of you who have been root digging, you'll recognize the cuppin, or digging tool, and I mentioned cuppin in the story. And here the child is thinking about, oh, I'm going to get a good yachi. Nice big one with moist roots that are easy to peel. And they're going to dig up the whole root and not snap the top off. So if you snap the top off, if you're in a hurry or you're not careful, you don't end up with food. All right, so this one's called I Love Piochi, bitter root. I love Piochi. She's bitter and strong and difficult and beautiful. She's grounded, fierce. She makes you kneel or stoop. She thrives where pretty much no one else will. She makes you pay attention. She's holy. She teaches us the power of the collective, literally. Folks, have you ever tried to dig and peel an entire gunny sack of piochi by yourself? Yeah, you're way better off filling a station wagon full of people to come and help you. It doesn't really matter who. Anyone willing to learn and help makes for good company. Piochi teaches us this too. By the time we stop for gas, wind our way up the ridge, and bounce down that rutted, rocky road, we're all so grateful to be there. The petty annoyances, the sibling squabbles, the long-held grudges, the arguments about who ate too much garlic last night or too many sunflower seeds this morning, that all just drifts away. I think the brisk spring wind took it. So grab a cup and digging tool and breathe in that fresh spring air. Enjoy the sunny morning, that gorgeous contrast of the biscuit-colored earth meeting the blue, blue sky. Literally, I went to Home Depot and looked at their paint chips. The exact shade is called sky blue. I never tire of that view, the golden-colored earth meeting the crisp blue sky. I remember Auntie helping teach us to dig, her scarf tied neatly on her head while she prayed to Creator and blessed us before we dug our first roots. Often when we dig piochi, we can see the dip of Sadis Pass in the distance. We have fond memories of journeys taken that way and great hopes for future fun to be had. That's the way to Nchiwana, the big river, Columbia River, and to Portland with its tax-free shopping malls, trailblazer basketball games, and the steakhouse my dad sometimes treats my nephews to. A place with all you can eat meat. Can you imagine? On a piochi digging day, there is no time for such things. We are alive and at peace with ourselves, each other, and all the world. Even after all these years, Auntie's blessings remain intact. We renew them, and I believe the wind carries our prayers back to her spirit. I love piochi. So in this story, we see the power and the wisdom of a gentle yet strong example of an elder who teaches children our ways simply by demonstrating, by being caring, right? And that's such a beautiful form of education. And we're all educators, right? We're all teaching those around us how to be through our actions, how we conduct ourselves, how we listen to one another or not, what tone we speak to each other in our voices. Is there kindness? Is there caring? All of these lessons are being shared and taught, whether we realize it or not. And in this story, I think very fondly about my auntie who helped to teach us so much as we were growing up, in the kind ways that she interacted with us. And also the beauty of the land, right? To be somewhere that just makes your spirit feel good. And as Roger has shared at the beginning of our event, Mother Earth is sacred, and all of nature, all of those more than human relations, they call us to be in relation with them. And we feel good when we take that time to do that. So I hope that sometime soon, tonight, tomorrow, everybody who is here gathering is able to, take that time to thank one of your more than human relations. If you're able to go outside and touch a tree and thank them for their beautiful presence in your life. And then also to thank your human relatives too, whether your roommates or your family members, whoever you see next. Think about, how am I modeling and being in relation with them? That includes yourself too, by the way. You speak to yourself and think to yourself, in a kind way, in a gentle way. That's important to do. All right, I think I have time. Let's see if I can squeeze one or two more together to finish off my time. I know we have at least one person here who's related to an amazing woman who was my counselor at the middle school at Wahpeton, where I am tonight. Here's the artwork that Krista did for this story. I'll show you. And the story is called Super Auntie Sue. Sometimes aunties have it within them to auntie an entire school. This is a rare sort of auntie, one who has a big heart, big patience, a love for laughter. She obviously has superpowers, including the ability to listen to the mumbling words and awkward shame and fleeting hope of hundreds of middle schoolers. Have you seen such an auntie? Have you had such an auntie? If so, you're blessed. I know I am. Attending public school on my reservation, I never had a Native American classroom teacher. Our district has simply not hired any. For those of us who made it through grades K through 5 and on to middle school, we had, for 3 glorious years, perhaps when we needed it most. But of course, we were not aware of it because, hello, we were middle schoolers. We had Super Auntie Sue. Super Auntie Sue was one of the counselors at our middle school. Her office was our refuge. We would go there to sit, to talk, to be. That's the thing about aunties. They know when to listen, when to speak, when to guide, when to nudge, and when to do a good old-fashioned shove, like being shoved out of the way of an oncoming car, except in this case, you are also driving the car to a bad decision. When to tell you about the proud history of our people, and when to demand that you go out and make a better future for us. Don't you see, she might tell you again. Your actions and behaviors represent our people. Everything you do matters. You are important. Aunties can give the most supportive, nurturing, butt-kicking you ever saw. Super aunties have a way of telling you to pull yourself together and also affirming it's okay to sometimes completely unravel. Sometimes she can do all of this without even saying a word. Super Auntie Sue never taught me in the classroom, but she always gave the most demanding homework. Listen to your father. Be kind to your mother. Encourage your friends to come to school. Stop gossiping and being cliquey. Sue gave assignments that were for the long haul. I never received a quarterly or midterm grade from Sue, but I always knew where I stood with her. I think back now about Sue's long career at the public school. Thousands of children needing her attention and love, and she always came through. We always tried our best on Sue's homework because she not only assigned it, she lived it. She reflected back to us the best in ourselves. Super Auntie Sue shared with each child her superpowers and taught us that we have them too. And here's the illustration at the end of the story. So I hope everybody who's gathered here has had some kind of wonderful person in school who's really encouraged them and helped to reflect back the best to you. I don't know. Do I have time for one more? Is that good? Roger, sorry to put you on the spot.
Of course, one more.
Okay, real quick.
Yeah,
All right, so I want to read this one too, because I think there's a lot of higher education people here. And this one's called Academic Aunties. Here's the artwork at the beginning. There's a special group of women who know the secret passages, trapdoors, and quicksand of the ivory tower. These women, sometimes elderly, sometimes young, sometimes in between, are good listeners, good observers. They are masterful at choosing their moments, knowing just when to draw a short dagger from the beaded holster at the back of their belt and thrust it forward to slay a dragon. I've seen him more than once. How can that short little blade do so much for so many? But these women are not looking for a fight. In general, they are happiest to visit quietly with a small group of people. They carry themselves in a way that shows you who they are, proud yet humble, kind but will hold you to high standards. These women are tough yet velvety soft. They are academic aunties. Being with them is like attending a calm and rejuvenating tea party. Their care and concern for you is evident in the warm scones they place on the table inside the cloth-lined basket. Did you want jam with your scone? Strawberry or blackberry? Oh, she remembers. She has a jar of huckleberry jam she was saving just for this occasion. What wonderful nourishment in more ways than one. Academic aunties tell stories, softly chuckle at jokes, or if naughty jokes are shared, sometimes they howl with laughter, passers-by in the hallway peering in with quizzical looks on their faces. Academic aunties talk about work projects and their families. They tell stories about back home, share ideas with generosity, and always keep an eye towards helping connect you with what will help you to heal, to be your best you. Against all odds, these women exist in the halls of academia, a place that is typically hostile to everything academic aunties bring: love, kindness, encouragement, patience, hope. So our aunties, when needed, keep these magical gifts tucked away. That's why they have such big purses and strong shoulders from carrying that big bag of auntie magic. I've had so many academic aunties. At every college I attended, I found at least one. These women who have very little to no reason to spend their time and energy help and hope on you, but in some blessed way, see a glint of potential amidst your wearying, flunking, lost my scholarship on academic probation self. And so they open their bag of anti-magic. They know which form to fill out and which office to take it to, and which office worker is the least passive aggressive. All of these things that are crucial to stop the bleeding and hemorrhaging of your academic and professional future from fading away. Academic aunties are partners in your dreams. They respect you enough to remind you in ways both implicit and explicit that in accepting auntie help, you become responsible for helping others in the future. You are expected to watch and learn about the auntie magic in their bags and to use what you learn to help others struggling with the same quicksand problems that you once fell into and avoid the trapdoors that you once were stumbling over. I've never seen a job ad for an academic auntie, yet I cannot imagine living without them. Perhaps it is for the best that HR isn't classifying, reviewing, and ranking one's academic auntiness, but maybe it's not. I don't know. All I know is that academic aunties are magical and fierce and kind and patient and creative and demanding, all in a good way. I dream of an academy filled with auntie magic. I see it now, the ivory tower in a snow globe with the sparkling flakes of academic auntie magic, casting a beautiful spell on everyone and everything. I hope we all get to attend the University of Auntie Magic. And here's the illustration at the end. Well, I think I'm out of time. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here and to share with you all.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing those stories and the beautiful artwork that goes with them. It's always a treat to see. I studied graphic design at the University of Washington many years ago, so I appreciate a good artist who's able to take the feelings and ideas and teachings of an author and be able to work with them. So that's a nice pairing you have there with those artists. Very good. I like that. All right. Thank you so much. Again, reminding us what some people call everyday magic, that it's all around us. It's every day. And so reminding us in our aunties and in the berries and in the salmon and all those things. So thank you so much. We'll be looking for those books. All right. Thank you so much. I'm now going to introduce Fern Naomi Renville. Fern is a storyteller, a theater artist, a director, playwright, an actor, a teaching artist. And she's an enrolled citizen of Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate, which is an Eastern band of the Oceti Sakowin. Sakowin? Okay. Sakowin. Sakowin. All right. I'm always going to be, I'm still working on Clallam, but thank you, Fern. And Fern has been working with Native youth in this area in a program called Red Eagle Soaring, and touched hundreds of lives in exposing them to their culture through theater. A very powerful connection for many, many youth who still think that opportunity was one of the turning points of their lives. And so that was very important work she's doing, but she's still doing that same kind of work, going out to schools, sharing our culture through theater and through storytelling. And she's going to share some stories here tonight. Here's something she wrote about an experience she had teaching a school in North Seattle, Sandpoint Elementary School. She led a school community learning program focusing on the Indigenous knowledge found in the traditional Coast Salish legend, Salmon Boy. Fern says, to witness an entire school become fluent in a foundational story of Coast Salish culture and to show respect for the theater of the Salmon people is to witness a tectonic cultural shift towards an understanding of Native people and sovereignty as contemporary, intersectional, and vital to American education. And this gives me, she said, such faith. So I'll also mention a couple other things about Fern, because she is my partner and we tell stories together and I learn from her constantly. She brings the voice of her old people with her. She's traveled this far to get here, but she's brought her stories with her. I'm always grateful for that. So I don't want to spend too much time bragging on her, but I will turn it over to Fern Naomi Renville.
Oh, thank you. Hello there. Good evening. Pardon me while I get situated. How mitakuyapi. Greetings, relatives. My name is Fern Naomi Renville. As Roger said, I'm an enrolled citizen of the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate, previously known as the Sisseton, the Dakota band that is the mother band of the Lakota. My father is Marvin Renville. My mother is Jeanette Salazar. My grandparents were Joseph and Naomi Renville. And my great-great-grandfather was Tiwakan, or Holy Lodge, who was the last chief of the Sisseton Wahpeton and who saw our people through internment at Fort Snelling, and then through negotiating a treaty and forced relocation to the Lake Traverse Reservation in South Dakota, which is where I am from. But my family, when we say where we are from, we say, and I say, that I am from what's now known as Badewakan, or Mille Lacs, Spirit Lake in Minnesota, The place where the Dakota people came into this world is where my family lived since time began until the quote unquote Dakota uprising. Since we were expelled with a bounty on our heads, my family has told these stories. They have told these stories of this place, of our history and our prehistory there. And there is an urgency to the telling. The Dakota people did not have printed text. It's true we had winter counts, which is a kind of literacy, but we had the Winter Lodge. The Winter Lodge was how all of our history and knowledge was passed on. This time of year in the Dakotas, not so very long ago, all the families would be separating into the winter lodges after the deer hunt. And to each winter lodge, a storyteller would be enticed. Yes, come to our lodge. You will be given the place closest to the fire and all the best food and lovely blankets and many children to keep you company. You wouldn't want to be without a storyteller for the long winter on the prairie. Oh no. And so my people and all American Indian tribal people on this continent are oral cultures. We passed on our knowledge only through speaking it. So everything had to be said over and over and over again, all through the winter in the Winter Lodge. That elder storyteller would share the entire mythic story of the Dakota people. Now, it's true that this elder storyteller would be the sort of formal storyteller of the lodge, but everybody would share these stories. You see, it would require everyone to learn them and share them. To imagine belonging to a culture in which you all know the stories and say them aloud together every day. I can't even fathom that kind of collective connection. I can feel glimpses of it in my lived connection to my family and my people. But the kind of connectedness that our ancestors enjoyed as the result of being an oral culture is something to rebuild and restore and rediscover. It hasn't gone away at all. It's right there. It's just a muscle that needs to be used and brought back. So to be Dakota is to share the Dakota stories. To be a Renville is to share the Renville stories. I grew up listening to the most long-winded stories and introductions. And now I have such affection for that Indian long-windedness because it is the signal identifier of an oral culture. How will you know who my ancestors were, who my people were, if I don't tell you? Today and tomorrow and the next day. And so I find it interesting that American Indian tribal cultures, which are identified as pre-literate or oral cultures, that is framed as a deficit, as a weakness, when in fact, whether the words are printed or spoken. Words. Indian people have immense facility with words. All oral cultures do. And so I'm going to tell you a story now. I'm going to tell you a story that explains why I greeted you all as relatives, why I greeted you all as mitakuyapi, all my relations, and why we have a saying, mitakuye oyasen, we're all related. Pardon me. In the beginning, there was Eon, the rock, and Hahepi, the nothing, the void. At that time, Eon and Hahepi existed without form or shape. They were like clouds. Now, Ea the rock at that time possessed in himself, in the blue blood inside his veins, all of the creative power of the universe. And Hahepi existed at that time as pure possibility. Ea and Hahepi wanted a family. Yes, like most of us. They wanted a family, and they knew that the only place for the power, that creative power, to make this family, the only place that it would come from was Ea, who possessed all of that creative power. Well, Ea knew that there was no place else for this power to come from. And he also knew that the strength of this family that he would make would depend on how much of his own power and spirit he was willing to give up and to give to that creation. And so Ea reached inside himself and took out most of his power. He took out most of his power and he molded it into a ball. Yes, he made Kushimaka, Grandmother Earth, and he placed her into Hahepi, the void. And so was born our Mother Earth. And then Ea took the rest of his power out. And so that Kushimaka would not be lonely, he made all the other spirits and entities in the universe. The star nation, the sun, the moon, Iktomi, the wind, Ska, the force who lives up, the power that lives up high. All of these entities were created by all of Eon's power. And then Ea opened his veins and that blue blood of his poured out. It poured out of him onto that new Kushimaka, that new Grandmother Earth. Half of his blue blood flowed around her and covered her in the first floodwaters. The other half of Ea's blue blood flowed into the sky and became the atmosphere, the air that we breathe. and the home of the powers that dwell up high. And then Ia became more like we know him now, hard, shriveled, powerless. And he fell to earth and became the first rock, Tunkashina, the grandfather of all of us. Now, in the Christian Genesis, Jehovah creates humankind out of nothing and retains his power over us. In the Dakota Genesis, Ia gives away all of his power to Kunshimaka and the other spirits of the universe so that we can live, and retains no power over us. Only stories, yes, Tunkashina, the grandfather. The grandfather stones still carry the stories. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about stones, but let me just say that because every living thing on Kunshimaka was created from her spirit and the spirit of Ia, the rock that she received it from. Ia and Kunshimaka are the grandfather and grandmother of us all. We are their children. We each possess some of their spirit and their power. And everything does, not just humans. Trees, rocks, animal relatives, everything has the power and spirit of Ia, the rock. Now, when fur trappers and missionaries first came to the Twin Cities area and met my ancestors, they asked, "What is the name of your creator?" And those Dakota people said, Wakantanka. And the settlers thought that meant, Wakantanka, that's the name of your creator. But Wakantanka actually means everything is the creator. Everything is sacred. And so that is why we say Mitakuye Oyasin, because we are all related. And because we are related, we have responsibilities to one another. Yes, we are a family, and we know that families need to have peace and order and harmony that are established by the elders, by the wise ones. We know that's not us. We know that's Kunshimaka and Tunkashina. Now, that was at the very beginning of this universe. But now, even now, right now, the Dakota people still live with this knowledge, this understanding, and this relationship to the grandfather stones. I will tell you the story now of the Inipi, or the sweat lodge, and how it came to the Dakota people, and how the Tunkashina stones, the grandfather stones, gave this gift to the people. And pardon me 1 second. Oh my gosh. Actually, how are we doing time-wise? We doing okay?
7:30 or so, longer.
Anyone know? Am I okay time-wise? Should I keep going?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going,
Okay.
and I'll tell it fast. A long time ago, In a Dakota camp lived 4 brothers who lived with their younger sister, a talented homemaker, a talented artist who made beautiful lodges and buckskin clothing and delicious food for her brothers. Every day, these 4 brothers went out hunting, and at the end of the day, they would return and share all that they had caught, and their sister would prepare it for them. And they were very happy together, this little family, until one day, one of those brothers did not return at the end of the evening. The next day, 3 brothers went out, but only 2 returned. On the 3rd day, only 1 brother returned. His sister begged him not to go out on that 4th day, not to go hunting. "I'm afraid I'll never see you again," she begged him, but he did not listen. He left too, and he also did not return. Oh, this little sister was just heartbroken. She was so grief-stricken that she couldn't eat or drink. She walked around wailing. But she became so thirsty that she picked up a little pebble and put it in her mouth to suck on it. And as she was sucking on it, she was still crying and sobbing, and she accidentally swallowed it. And that sister, that young woman, she conceived right then and there. Stone Boy, yes. And 4 days later, she gave birth to a baby, a little Dakota baby made out of stone, yes. This little baby, this new mother, she held it in her arms and she looked sadly at her little son and she said, "Oh, my poor little baby, I cannot take care of you, for my heart is broken and I am grieving. Somebody else in the village will have to look after you." And she took that little newborn and put him outside the door of her lodge and went and sat back down by the fire. Well, that little baby did not stay outside. He crawled back in. That little baby crawled up to where his mother sat, and he was now about a 9-month-old and crawling. And he put out his little arms for her to pick him up. And she picked up that little baby. And she said, "My son, look at you. You need someone to love you, someone who is healed and can give you what you need. That is not I." And she took that little baby and put him once again outside the door of her lodge. And then that little baby once again walked back into the lodge, walked back into where his mother was sitting. And this mother looked at her son, who was now a youth, and said, "Oh, my son, look at you. You are an active young youth. You need an active parent and a father who can look after you. And also, you don't have any clothes on." And so that young youth, that young boy walked out of the lodge. And when he came back in, he was a young, fully grown man of about 21 years of age. And he was beautifully and fully dressed in lovely buckskins. And his mother said, "Oh, you are now a man. You do not need to be taken care of. But how will you take care of us? For you have no hunting gear." And so that young man walked out of the lodge. And when he returned, he had everything he needed: a bow, arrow, nets, snares, knives, etc. And he went right out and got a deer for his mother to prepare. Now, this mother, she started to accept this child into her life. I can only imagine it was quite an adaptation. She started to feel pretty happy. And after a few days of enjoying one another's company and getting to know each other, they were enjoying a lovely meal together when Stoneboy said, "Mother, I am so happy here with you, but I can't help noticing we're a very unusual Dakota family. Where's the rest of our family?" "Ah," said his mother. "Well, you have 4 uncles, but they left to go hunting and I have not seen them since. I don't know what happened to them, but it's hard to imagine that they wouldn't return home if they could." And so that night, Stoneboy tossed and turned thinking about these uncles. And the next morning, he announced to his mother that he would go and search for them. Oh, she cried and she begged and she pleaded. "No, no, don't leave me, please. I'm afraid you'll never come back." But Stoneboy had to go. He had to go find his family. And so he left. He traveled for 4 days to the north until he reached the very edge of where the Dakota people consider their lands to be. And then he came across in some dark woods an old lodge. Now, this old lodge did not have straight teepee poles. It had twisty, gnarly teepee poles. And the skin that covered this old teepee was not white and clear so that the light could come in. No, it was black from the smoke, and it made everything dark inside. Now, as he approached this lodge, Stoneboy could see that there was an old woman in front of the lodge, and that leaning against the lodge were 4 bundles of what looked like sticks tied with thongs. Well, as he got closer to the lodge, he could see that this was no ordinary woman. This old woman was about 10 feet tall. She was a witch woman. Now, Stoneboy had never met a witch woman, but he knew in his gut that something was wrong. He knew this old woman meant him ill. And so she said to him, "Oh, grandson, just what I need, someone to massage my back. I'm in such pain. Please, if I lie down on the ground, won't you please walk on my back and with your feet massage my back?" Stoneboy didn't exactly want to do this, but he wasn't sure how to politely get out of it. So she lay down and he walked up to her and very carefully and gingerly stepped onto her back. And then Stoneboy could see that underneath her dress, there was something about her backbone. Oh yes, her backbone was sharp, like a sharp flint blade. Yes, this backbone, should he fall on it, would slice him in half. And so very carefully, Stoneboy walked on her back. "Oh, you're not doing much. You need to really step right in the middle of my back, push really hard," she said. But still he wasn't doing it to her satisfaction. And so she started to shimmy and shake to make him lose his footing and fall on that backbone. But he was ready for that. He leaped up And with all of his strength, he landed with both of his feet on her neck. And he broke her neck and killed her instantly. Well, sounds like a happy ending. But Stoneboy still hadn't found what had happened to his uncles, although he was wondering if this witch hadn't had something to do with it. Just then, he heard voices. He heard voices and he realized that they were coming from the rocks in the stream. There was a little stream that wound right by. And these stones were calling to him. They said, "Come, come." And he followed those voices and picked the rocks that were calling to him. And he brought those grandfather stones to the banks of the stream. And he built a fire. And when it was good and hot, he put those rocks in that fire and let them heat up. And while they were getting hot, he followed the instructions that they gave him. He followed the instructions to gather 12 slender willow branches, the flexible ones, the young ones, and to bend them and make a little tiny lodge, and to cover it with his robe, his warm buffalo robe. And then, when those rocks were nice and hot, he took those rocks and put them inside the lodge. And then he went and got those 4 bundles of sticks that were leaning against that old witch's lodge. And when he took them over by the fire, he saw that they weren't sticks. They were bones and dried skin, little bundles. This was all that remained of his uncles. And so, as instructed, he took those 4 bundles of dried bone and skin into the lodge. And he took a bladder full of water, and he took some cedar, and he dropped that cedar on the fire, and it filled with cedar smoke. And then he poured the water on those grandfather stones. And the inside of that little lodge filled with hot steam. And those grandfather stones started to sing. And they said, "Sing with us. We will teach you the songs now." And the grandfathers taught Stoneboy the songs to sing in the sweat lodge. And by the time they had finished singing 4 songs, and the 4th door, the 4th time that little lodge opening was tossed open to the east, Stoneboy and the grandfather stones were joined by 4 new voices. And when the outside light came into the lodge, Stoneboy could see that sharing the lodge with him were his 4 uncles, and they smiled at him and greeted him. And Stoneboy said to his uncles, "The grandfather stone gave me life, and the grandfather stones restored your life. And so the Dakota people will use this Inipi Sweat Lodge to restore ourselves to life." And it's true, we do. The Sweat Lodge tradition is alive and well. Every Friday night, my brothers and my dad make a sweat lodge, and anyone who needs it is welcome to come and be healed there, singing the songs, being restored. Thank you for letting me share. It's just a delight. And it was so lovely to get to listen to the authors who came in front of me, especially poets. I aspire. Thank you.
Thank you, Fern. It's always a wonder to me to hear the mythic stories of any tribal people, especially the ones that are carried by the women who have a connection with the earth itself. And so I just feel wonderful tonight to have these authors share their stories, their dreams and visions, the stories of their people, the voice of their people, connecting us with their connection to their people. I think that we can all learn from that, remind ourselves of that, that our ancestors sent us these stories to help us. And it's our, I'm going to say, responsibility to find those stories and to carry them in our heart. That's where these stories, like the ones Fern shared, that's where they're carried in her heart, so she can tell them wherever she goes. So we're blessed to have that voice among us, and we're blessed to have all the other voices that shared their stories today, and their wisdom today, and their good nature, and their wonderful, wonderful connection to their ancestors. So when we do this around here, this hand gesture, it's called putting your hands up to people, saying thank you, you're welcome, goodbye. So this gesture has a meaning. This gesture has a meaning that says that you lift me up, you lift me up, you lift my heart, you make me happy. So I want to say to each and every one of the presenters, the authors and the storyteller, I put my hands up to you. Thank you so much. You've lifted us up tonight. You've lifted it up so we are connected to our stories again, are connecting our people and our ancestors. And a lot of the future is going to be carried on this work. So I really have just one more thing I wanted to say, because there was I did the math. It's 50 years, 1970. That's when I went to the University of Washington the first year, studying graphic design. I wanted to be an illustrator. And so I think I've accomplished that. I've done a lot of illustration work, but also I connected with the American Indian Studies department at the time and took various Native classes and learned so much from the good teachers there. And one of the instructors, I'm not sure he started exactly that first year, but I know that I took a class from him on Northwest Coast Art. It was Marvin Oliver, who left us recently, but his work continues. His students remember him. Many people remember him. He was so generous in the way of his people, the Quinault people and the Isleta Pueblo people, that he created an event called Raven's Feast, where the graduating Native students were honored for all the work they'd done and for all the people that had helped them in their journey. And Marvin said, I just want to do that. I want to help recognize these people, and in the way of all of our tribes, to recognize the good work of people is something that we do. So Marvin was very, very generous with his time and his resources, his heart to honor the people that had graduated. So I'm hoping you know that there is a fund, the Marvin Oliver Fund, that we're hoping to get donations from people, get contribution from people, so we might continue some of the work that he started, especially honoring the graduates every year with a Native way of saying thank you, and a Native way of recognizing the hard work you've put in and the accomplishments of all that. So if I understand it properly, that if you go to the American Indian Study, University of Washington Department of American Indian Studies, and look at their website, there'll be a link or more information at least about the Marvin Oliver Fund. So we want that work to continue, and we want to continue this event as well, to make sure that we have the voices of authors and storytellers coming before us and sharing the words of our ancestors through their modern voice, and also looking at what can be as well. So we do have a chance to, I believe we do have a chance to look at some of the chat messaging that you might have done, some questions perhaps. I believe that
To me.
Dana Arvizo, right? Oh no, okay, all right, excuse me, Darlene. All right, Dawn, excuse me. Can you go ahead? I knew it started with the D. I apologize. I can't see those little pictures anymore. Go ahead, and if you want to take over and maybe get a few of these, and some of the presenters can respond if they're asked a question. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Fern, Michelle, and Tracy. And this is just an incredible night of thank you. I mean, I've got many students out there. I'm excited to see your names, and also have lots of colleagues. Know that myself and Ray Paris and Chris Tuton and Kai and Laura, we're all part of Sacred Breath and bring all this together. And we are very, very thankful for the Department of American Indian Studies, and also with the Diversity Seed Grant at the University of Washington, as well as the Squaxin Island Tribe, and also the Intellectual House academic programming and the Bank Center for Education Justice. I mean, everyone pulls together to make events like this happen. We have 2 events per year, so we're looking at another event in the spring. And so, please join us. You'll see the flyer. We'll make sure everybody here receives that information. And so in the question and answer or in the chat box, please put in your questions for Tracy, Michelle, Fern, or anybody. They're going to be our panel and have conversation with all of you, and we welcome your questions. A little bit about myself while we're waiting. Oh, got a question here. It says, hi Fern, I'm wondering about the Sweat Lodge on Fridays. Would it be possible for me to join as well? And this is from A Sorrow. So more information about the Sweat Lodge on Fridays.
That would be lovely. However, my father and brothers don't live anywhere near us. They're in a different state. But however, there absolutely are people here in the Puget Sound area who hold sweat lodges. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I'm happy to give you some names. But Rocky Shotbell up at Tulalip. I know that Karina Walters, who's at the the UW, is a Sweat Lodge person. So, and of course, there are a number of people who use the Sweat Lodge at Daybreak Star. So there's absolutely resources here to tap into. Gotta ask around.
Nice. To all of you, there's a question. It says, what inspired you to become storytellers and or write books? Go ahead, Tracy.
Okay. I did want to just note that we had Curtis in the Q&A was asking how to get everyone's books. And so I had responded to him, but I wanted to make sure that Michelle and Fern did also. But if you're looking for books, mine are all trade published, so you can get them at any bookstore, your local independent bookstore. You can order them online from any book retailer, bookshop.org, etc. But how I got started in writing, really, as I kind of mentioned earlier when I was talking, is a need to have books that were showing contemporary Cherokee life and culture, to not just share, not just for my son to have, but thinking about, other Cherokee children entering the public school system and thinking about other Native children and how isolating it is, and reinforcing of how invisible your culture is when you walk in and nothing is presented within the curriculum after 1900. And I'm happy to say that I'm certainly not, leading the cause here or anything. There are a number of people that are writing and illustrating for children now from a variety of Native nations. And so I feel like we are really gaining a critical mass. And so that fuels the work that I do too. But it stemmed from this sense of, okay, so I have our traditional stories I can share with my child. Those are also represented in picture books. And anything beyond that are things about the Trail of Tears, which again, we don't seem to exist after that. And yet we are here. Our government, was reformed, community did, reformed. And then we moved to kind of Will Rogers and Willa Mankiller as the two people that might have biographies, and literally nothing else. And so I kind of extrapolated that further in looking at things. And I said, okay, where is any knowledge of what Native nations have been through, really advocating for things that their citizens needed, the struggles that they've gone through, these horrible policies and laws that have come down on us. And I started thinking, there's got to be ways to integrate this, you know, from a fiction side, from a nonfiction side, and bring that. So it really came about when I became a mother and was looking at how nothing had changed since I was a child, that literally we were still invisible. And I knew, because of my work in DC, nothing would change, because the majority of people there, you know, about 3 to 5% on each side of the aisle actually know sovereignty. You know, they know Native nations treaties, our, you know, our community's needs, but 90%, they're apathetic. And so how does that shift? Well, there's got to be something that's happening at a much younger age, where we are sharing with folks, you know, not just only having our children, who over 90% are in public schools, you know, able to see themselves, and when they aren't, you know, always having to be the one teaching about, you know, their culture in the classroom, but also when those folks grow up and become elected officials and business leaders or whoever they are, that there's that awareness there. And so I felt like this was a way for me to kind of continue my work of activism and doing something that I love, which is reading. I read lots of books, and writing. I just hadn't written for children, and it's definitely the the hardest work. You know, writing a legal brief is a cinch compared to the tight writing that's required for children and the lyrical language that one uses. But it's absolutely the most fun I've ever had in my life. So, whatever for the question.
Thank you, Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle?
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I think that, you know, Tracy has shared such wonderful wisdom with us in that, you know, we have to get our stories, our perspectives, our teachings out there. You know, the world needs it. This settler society needs it, right? Our stories and teachings, they're of this land. They're so old, right? If we think about all these institutions, you know, the settler state itself, it's so young. It's such a baby compared to our beautiful, strong, enduring Indigenous nations and societies, right? And so we have to bring those teachings out. And they're wonderful, and they touch both your head and your heart, right? That's what I try to remind my doctoral students. It's like, yeah, you're thinking, good, but are you thinking? Right? And so our teachings are so wonderful at helping us to see that. And just imagine if we can transform our institutions back into those ways of being and knowing. And we know it when we see it, right? Because it touches our heart. It makes us feel good. Maybe you've even taken a university class like that, right? We're like, wow, that was fun. I learned so much. I remember so much about that experience and how I felt. But that's probably not the norm. And so, you know, it's a good reminder of what's possible. And I think, you know, our coming together in events like this, of sharing, that's our people's way, right? And, you know, books are a modern way of doing that, of sharing. You know, each book is a gift, right? The writer is sharing and saying, here's some of my ideas of what I've learned that I want to share with you. And so that's why I do it, is to carry on the storytelling tradition. You know, and we have so many powerful teachers and role models around us. And we all have something to contribute, right? Everybody's voice and perspective is unique and important and needed. And that's what makes us strong. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Fern, question to you. And then also there's another question. I'm wondering if the number 4 is
The number
sacred
4 is everything in the Dakota worldview. You've probably noticed that. You know, one of the things that I'm really struck by living in the Northwest being a person from the plains, is how hard it is to know which direction I'm going here, because I can't see the stars, because there's this diffuse light. And on the prairie, where it's kind of, flat, and where I see the stars, there are these 4 cardinal points that I get to see twice a day, when the sun rises and when it sets. It's like this subliminal geometry that informs the relationship with the sky. So 4 is everything. And we have the 4 directions, who are the children of, they're the children of Anugite, double-faced woman, who she's kind of the mother of humanity, kind of like Eve. She was punished and banished from Sky World, came down here, ended up luring humans onto the world, et cetera, et cetera. But she was punished because she was the most beautiful of all day people. So she was punished, turned into double-faced woman, still beautiful in front, but in back, a hideous face that showed her character, which was lacking. However, she became, she is the one who brings Dakota women and artists our visions in our dreams at night. When a young Dakota girl came of age, traditionally, she would go into the Moon Lodge. She wouldn't be alone there. All of the women would come in and tell her their knowledge. They would drop knowledge on her, give her everything she needed to know. Don't you wish you had gotten that? And then at night, while she was sleeping, she needed to be listening to Anugite, double-faced woman, who would come and show her a design. This design would be given to just this girl becoming a woman. And she would interpret that design in porcupine quills on a little piece of buffalo skin. And that design would be hers for life. It would be her, like her, it's capitalist, but her brand or her logo, her spirit symbol from the dream world, from Anugite, double-faced woman. So it's a long answer, sorry.
That's all right.
And I became a storyteller because I was the firstborn granddaughter, and because I was born without a right hip socket. So I spent my early childhood and young childhood years with mobility issues, hanging around with the old folks, with my grandparents, and listening not just to mythic stories, but to gossip and to stories of recent history. I'm reminded that we need to tell these stories of things that are happening right now, because those might be tomorrow's mythic stories. So we have to keep telling the stories of right now and the mythic stories. And also the stories haven't stopped coming to us, so. Okay, long answer.
No worries. Sometimes I tell people, if you learn to listen, sometimes you can hear the ancestors share their stories between 1 and 5 in the morning, when everything's black and quiet and no noise. And I always encourage students to listen and listen for those stories. Thank you. Thank you for the response. There's another question here. It says, as white presenting Native Americans, how does that impact your life and how you navigate your community? What are you doing to make sure that Native Americans who are brown presenting get to share their stories and present as you all did tonight?
Question.
It's a wonderful question. It basically stems from intentionality. And I know, as I said, there's numerous people who are coming into this field. And so one of the things that I see is, it's important to me now that I've kind of figured out how the industry works. There are 2 people who've kind of been foundational in terms of writing Native literature for young people. And that's Joseph Bruschak. He's been doing this over 40 years. Cynthia Leidick Smith, well over 20 years. She's a Muskogee Creek citizen. She has her own imprint that's coming out with HarperCollins. It starts in January, called Heart Drum. And beyond that, kind of some people come and go. And so there has to be this groundswell of folks coming into the industry. And we need to have folks from a variety of backgrounds. And within my tribe, we look from blonde hair, blue eyed to Black. And that is what I expect in terms of Native citizenry, right? Because it's a political and legal distinction, as much as it is also a cultural one. So I'm very comfortable, like I say, helping to mentor people from a variety of backgrounds, regardless of how they present. And we're intentional about putting together panels when we present at large, national teacher conferences or librarian conferences, et cetera, to show that variety of people across the Native nations. And one of the books that was so popular this last year and this year is Fry Bread. And that's by a Black Seminole citizen, Kevin Millard. So like I say, we've got Native people that range the spectrum in terms of people writing and illustrating for children. And we're very intentional, like I say, when we're asked to do things, that we show that spectrum, because we are also trying to break down the paradigm that we all look a certain way, or that, people are going to dress a certain way, et cetera, because we know who's in our communities. But really, when you're still in 2020, in many ways working against the stereotypical Indian persona, we have to be intentional about what we do. And so I'm grateful for, like I say, the wide variety in terms of how people present, also where they're from. Some people have been raised in an urban area, maybe very brown skin, but that's been their entire life, has been in an urban area, where others of us have lived in our community, and then we've gone and lived in urban areas. Now we're back in our community. Some are still in urban areas, so there's also that, those layers of complexity, again, that we want to show. So I love the folks that I get to hang out with, and the way that the children's literature world works. I feel like it's very collaborative. We don't believe there's a limited pieces of pie, like we can bake more pies, and we want everyone's stories to be shared. So I'm always, like I say, trying to recruit people that can share their stories, can make the art, because that only helps our children, and they are our future. So we need to, help lift them up so that they see themselves in stories and books. And it's also why intentionally in my books, you always see a variety of people, and face colors and skin tones, et cetera, because otherwise I'm not representing the people in my Native nation. And that's a travesty if a Cherokee person looks at this and they don't see themselves.
Anyone else? Thank you.
I think that's an awesome question. Having grown up as a quote unquote half-breed in redneck country, I have a pragmatic view of what privilege my light complexion gives me. I would be sent into a setting when that light skin was called for. So there's absolutely privilege. There's passing privilege. I think that one of the ways that we can support sovereignty is by respecting a definition of American Indian identity that consults with tribal entities as the primary source for who gets to decide. Like, only tribes get to decide who they are. Nobody else. Only the Sisseton people can decide who is Sisseton. I have no power to declare myself Dakota. I am only Dakota because my family and my community claim me. And absolutely, all of us adults, especially who now have left the reservation, although I will say that there's a kind of fluidity too that isn't really recognized, where people leave the res, they go to the city, they come back, they come and go. None of my family stays in one place. We come and go according to opportunities. And besides, if there's a new tribal administration every 4 years, everything's changing. So yes, those of us who live away from our home reservations, it's incumbent upon us to maintain some kind of real lived relationship, real lived ties with our families. Now that's can be problematic for any family that's split up geographically, but for Indian folks and for artists, like we're always just like hustling for 2 pennies to get home. So it's a privilege to live here on the West Coast right now. In my home state of South Dakota, it is a trauma to be here in King County and witness the genocidal maniac in charge of South Dakota and the cost that my people are bearing. So I don't know where I was going with that, but.
Thank you, Fern. Michelle, and then also Michelle, there's a question from a former student of mine, Julie Dorr, who's also looking for finding books that connect to local tribes for preschool age youth.
Oh yeah, thank you, Dawn. And I believe Tracy put a nice reply to your former student's question. And so there's some nice resources listed there in the chat for Julie Dorr. Yeah, and thank you to the anonymous person who asked the question. And I would like to, agree with the fellow panelists, and also to state that for me, for what I was taught, by my community, by my elders, is the importance of Indigenous nation building, right? So how is our work strengthening our tribal nations? So that's a big question, but we can all do something, every day. As I had mentioned in the Q&A, and somebody kindly pasted my response in the chat, my author royalties are donated to our Sipsikwatla, American Indian Alaska Native Teacher Education Program, which is a fully funded Master's in Education and Teacher Licensure program. And so we're a 12-month program. So every fall right now, we recruit for the new cohort who will enter June 2021 and graduate with their master's degree and teaching license in June 2022. As I had mentioned, is fully funded. We pay for all the school expenses, a free laptop, as well as a living stipend every month, so our students don't have to work. If they have kids, we provide a dependent stipend. And in June, when our current cohort graduates, we'll have 104 alumni. So that's, to me, significant nation building work.
Mm-hmm.
Our work is, the program is operated as a consortium with the 9 federally recognized tribes in the state of Oregon. And so we meet with our Tribal Advisory Council. They determine our admissions. So they review and rank the applicants according to their tribe's needs and priorities. So it's a real privilege. And that's just one example. And there are so many all around us about what are we doing in our everyday lives and our work, to strengthen tribal nations, to make a better future, for the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you for your posts there, Tracy. Also, there's another former student, Kenneth Whitten, wanted to share, if you want to learn more about storytelling with Roger and Fern, take AIS, American Indian Studies, Department 375. When Roger is teaching the class, it will be one of the most unique experiences that you will ever have. I've learned more about Coast Salish art and storytelling from this class and have transmitted this knowledge to my own children. And I also, if it's okay, Fern, to share, on Facebook, you and Roger share evening storytelling. You want to share a little bit about that? And it's for all ages.
It's mostly every now and then it will be kind of little R-rated, but I will always warn viewers. My day job is as a theater director, and on March 28th, we were set to premiere a play that Roger and I wrote, and it was a fully staged musical that was just going to be amazing. 2 weeks before that, as you know, we shut down. And so this play didn't happen. And I literally went from being in the middle of intensive, like frantic activity as getting this ready to open, to being locked in my little tiny apartment with Roger, not having any idea what was going to happen next. And so just deciding to start telling stories on Facebook in the evening was like, just like feel useful and feel like not so isolated. And so FYI that we've made some lemons or lemonade out of our lemons. We adapted the play into a radio play or an audio drama, whatever you want to call it, a podcast. And it is available for free on the Sound Theater website, and which also will direct you to, it's got SoundCloud and YouTube and a variety of places. And so that is, it's also totally that one's all ages. Yeah. And that was like super fun to make. I'm actually just having a little bit of postpartum blues now that it's done. But oh, yes.
What it was.
This was the stage mock-up. Isn't this cool?
Nice.
We could see it.
But
So, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, we got to listen to it all together as a cast on Saturday night. And it was really wonderful. It really did feel like it wasn't just a placeholder for the dream that could have been. It was actually its own wonderful thing. And it's been a kind of a lifesaver this fall to have regular human contact, even if it is more online time. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, all of you. I'm being mindful of time here. And before we go, if there's any lasting, comments from each of you and or questions for each other, go ahead and take a look. Tracy, Fern, and Michelle, do you have questions for each other?
Can I just say that you each said such wonderful things? And Michelle, you mentioned that Indian communication isn't about up here, it's about feelings. We don't really go for the argumentative discussion style. It's about feeling. We want to feel each other. And Tracy, just you're like case in point of someone from an oral culture who's so well positioned to pick up literacy with great mastery and power. So very cool.
I just want to say what a blessing it has been tonight, because I have been doing school visits virtually since Indigenous Peoples Day, and I'm just exhausted. And so I laid down for a while this afternoon, and I just asked Une Lanai to put me in the right place for this evening so that I would have the energy to be here. And I hope you all, got something out of what I shared tonight, but I was truly blessed by both of you. And just listening to your stories, I was like, yes, this is what I needed, because so much of it is always the giving. And it's very hard to receive because you're in this environment where I'm talking to a camera. I don't get to interact. When I visit schools, I interact with children. And so just to hear you all share your stories and to be able to just sit back and take that in, my heart is so full. So I just say wado, and the form of I am grateful is Kali'ila Iga, and that I just want to say that I am grateful to both of you, and again to the University of Washington American Indian Studies Department for having this type of gathering. I mean, it's wonderful. So
I just echo the words of gratitude, praise for our fellow panelists, and thanks to the organizers. And happy anniversary, UWIS. Can't wait to see what you do in these next 50 years.
that's amazing. That's a great accomplishment. That's just wonderful.
Just grateful to you all. I wish you a good night. So, Kwatlanu Shmatash.
Thank you. Any questions from our team? Comments? I know we all enjoy doing this, and putting these together and bringing us together as collaborators and making all of our lives known that we are all here together and we're still here. And there's so many of us, and we all have sacred words and wisdoms to share with everybody. And so thank you all.
Thank you again. Hands up to these people for sharing their knowledge, their wisdom, their good hearts with us tonight, and in a way that I won't forget. So I am honored that you asked me to join in any way. I would have done anything to try to be a part of this. So I thank you so much. And one of my teachers said, it's very simple. You go out and you lift people up, you praise them, you tell them how good they are, you tell them how much we need them. And I definitely got lifted up tonight. So again, I put my hands up. Khatning Siam, good people. Thank you very much.
I hope you're all reading the comments in the chat box. There's many coming through, and I'll keep looking through. We'll if you want to look at some of the comments, we all lift each other up. Thank you.
Thank you.